Alrighty, so I said I was going to do this a while ago and I forgot, and someone reminded me, so thank you. We are doing rough calculations of the gear ratio on this 2023 Gen 3 Outlander XMR700. And the way we're doing it is very simple. So you can see we have a green mark on the secondary pulley here and a green mark on this part of the engine mount there. We also have a big green arrow on the wheel pointing up to this mark up here. And then I grab my ratchet and I turn the engine over. Excuse me, don't turn the engine over, turning the transmission. And I'm counting how many turns of the secondary pulley it takes to turn the rear tire one complete revolution. That gives you your ratio, your final drive ratio, not including the reduction from the belt. The reduction from the belt is a little trickier, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I did this in high and low range, right? Right now it's in high range. And if you do it in high range, it takes 12 turns of the secondary clutch, which is the input to your transmission, your sub-transmission, I guess. So it's a 12-to-1 ratio in high, and low is a 24-to-1 ratio. So that's pretty easy to remember. You literally have a 2-to-1 difference from low to high, which is pretty good. And that's of low gear, and that's what I expected. So that low gear ratio, coupled with the fact that these clutches are massive, means this thing has a very low gear. Now keep in mind, I've already done the 4.14% gear reduction in here by swapping in the gears out of the HD7. While we're in here, take a look at these clutches. These are the new P-Drive clutches. They look really sweet. Super nice looking clutch hardware. Probably the best looking CVT I've ever seen, to be honest. It is pretty sweet. You see how that roller travels there, and just very good clutching on this machine. I'd still much rather have gears because I like to shift, but I think for a belt drive, this is about as good as you can get. So yeah, now let's talk about the ratio between the primary and secondary clutches, right? So that's also a big gear reduction. Because this thing's not like a Yamaha, it actually squeezes the belt when it starts going. So once you take off, this belt will drop in to the secondary pulley a little bit, and then the primary pulley will grab onto it, and that'll pull the belt out a little bit. So I did some rough measurements. I can't tell you exactly what the ratio is when it engages. There's a lot of variables here. You know, how much is the belt going to actually jump up on the primary pulley once it engages? So basically, I think it's about 9.5 inches here and about 3 inches here. So that's another 3-to-1 reduction. So if you do that math, this thing's close to 75-to-1. That's geared a lot lower than even like a Honda Rubicon, which is 54-to-1 final ratio, and it's got a bigger motor. Now, of course, you lose some power and torque to the resistance of the belt, but like I said, this is a pretty good clutch belt system, so this thing has some mighty low gears. I'm going to throw all these numbers into Excel for you. Don't worry about remembering them. I'd appreciate it if someone who has a non-XMR can repeat this exercise and tell me what their numbers are as far as high and low range, and that'll let me go through and complete my table. Because right now there's still a couple unknowns in the transmission as far as what the teeth counts are, but if I have the ratios from both machines, I can probably figure it all out. But yeah, pretty simple. You don't even need this ratchet either. You can literally just grab onto the pulley and turn it. That just made it a little easier because you are fighting that belt resistance. And when you're turning this and you feel that drag, that's that belt inefficiency, right? That's the belt rubber sticking to the pulley, and that is why you need all this cooling, because belts generate heat and they're not very efficient. But this machine does have a very low ratio. So again, we had 24-to-1 in low range and 12-to-1 in high range. So pretty cool. All right, so here's how the numbers work out. Let's focus on these numbers up here first. So like I said, mine was 24-to-1 in low and reverse and 12-to-1 in high. And that's with my 4.14% reduction. So if you take that out of it by dividing by 1.0414, you end up with this, about 23 and 11.5-to-1 on a stock machine. And that's a really good ratio. So if we say the belt is a 3-to-1 reduction at the lowest, right, like when you need the lowest ratio possible, and you assume that the belt is going to give you the lowest ratio possible, because that's what you have to do with the belt. You have to hope, assume, and pray, because you have no control of the actual ratio. So if we multiply all of these by 3, that's all this is doing right here. We get that mine has about a 72% 72 to 1 overall crawl ratio in low and reverse, which is awesome, right? A Rubicon, like we said earlier, is like 54 to 1 from the factory. So that's a really good stock ratio, being about 70 to 1 stock. And now this is totally an estimate. Like I said, these belt ratios are bullshit, so take this with a grain of salt. Let's just kind of threw that in there, just give myself an idea. These are the results of me counting tire revolutions. While I was at it, I also figured out the rear diff ratio. It looks like it's the same rear diff ratio as the other cams, which is 3.6 to 1. I just counted revolutions of the tire to revolutions of the drive shaft. Pretty simple. And we know the intermediate gear ratios because Can-Am actually published those in the parts diagrams. We have the intermediate gears for several different machines. I have another video on that whole discussion with all the different intermediate gears. I guess I can pull it over here. But what we still don't know is most of the other gear ratios. I don't know the high and low individual ratios or reverse. I don't know the bevel gear ratios. And if someone can tell me what their ratios are on a stock machine, that'll kind of help me figure out what's going on here. We're kind of assuming right now all the machines have the same bevel ratio, but we don't really know. So yeah, let me pull over that other YouTube video I did a while ago. This is a video I did on like the factory ratios. And I kind of was kind of guessing, but I put all the different intermediate ratios in here. So the big takeaway here is if you have an XMR or a Pro and you do my little I'm going to call it the HD7 reduction, you get 4.14%. But if you have a 700 base and you do the HD7 reduction, you get 10.5% reduction. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Definitely fun to play with. But yeah, if anyone wants to, pull off their belt box on a regular HD7, aka base model, not an XMR or Pro, and do what I'm doing here, comment those numbers below, and I can do some math and try to figure a few more things out. But let me know if you guys find this video helpful, and yeah, thanks for viewing. What's up, guys? So I dug up this old spreadsheet I made a long time ago with some of the ratios from the other common Can-Ams. If you look at these 3 machines here, the XMR1000, XMR850, and the Highlifter 850, these are what their ratios are, not including the belt. So 27, 21, and 25. So you can look at it right off the bat. You can know that 24 is a bigger number than 21. So this thing is geared lower than an XMR850, not including the clutches. And the clutches are much better on the Gen 3 Can-Am, and the clutches are bigger, so you have a bigger reduction. So what I said from the beginning was that this machine is better than an XMR850 because it actually has low gears. The XMR850 is not geared very low in low range. And you can see that it's kind of on par with an XMR1000. The XMR1000 has a little lower gears in the transmission, but again, this XMR700 is better clutching. So just wanted to add that comparison. This is some stuff I did literally, 5 years ago. I have videos and all this stuff if you ever want to look it up. Polaris is good about publishing their gear ratios in their manuals. With Can-Ams, you got to do a bunch of digging. It's a big pain in the butt. While we're out here, pulling the belt cover off this machine is pretty easy. You have to pull off this little intermediate plastic right here, that one, and you have to pull off this inner fender liner here. That can be done with a few plastic snaps. It's really easy. Then you take off your snorkel connector, take off both those hose clamps, pull this out of the way. And once that's out of the way, you can easily get the snorkel box, or the belt box, off. And of course, it's a nice aluminum belt box on the back, which is great. It's a huge improvement to the Can-Ams of old. Be careful not to strip out any of the screws. Start them all by hand when you're putting the belt cover back on, though. Yeah. All right, so here's a demonstration how these clutches work. It probably makes sense to have that in this video. So you can see the primary clutch squeezes the belt, and then it starts to turn the transmission. And you can also see that when it was grabbing the belt, it wasn't dropping it down very much. That's a little misleading because there's no load on it right now, and this is torque sensitive. So The calculating the ratio of the belt is a lot of bullshit. So take those numbers with a grain of salt. I'm going to say it's about a 3 to 1.